Poirot and the Mystery of the Azure Peacock. Chapter 1. A Peacock Among Pigeons. The late October rain lashed against the windows of the flat in Whitehaven Mansions as Hercule Poirot carefully arranged his correspondence upon the mahogany writing desk. Outside, London had succumbed to that particular melancholy that accompanies the dying days of autumn, grey skies that seem to press down upon the city like a leaden weight, and a dampness that penetrated to the bone despite the cheerful crackling of the fire in the grate. Captain Hastings, seated comfortably in an armchair, rustled his newspaper. "Dismal day, eh, Poirot? Makes one glad to be indoors." "Indeed, mon ami," Poirot replied, his waxed moustache twitching slightly as he meticulously aligned the edges of the envelopes before him. "Though I confess this weather, it creates in me the ennui most profound." Poirot's nimble fingers paused over an envelope of heavy cream vellum, distinguished from the others by both its quality and the ornate coat of arms embossed upon the seal. With characteristic precision, he slit it open and extracted a card edged in gold leaf. "Ah!" he exclaimed, his eyes brightening. "Perhaps, Hastings, the remedy for our ennui has arrived." "What is it?" Hastings inquired, lowering his newspaper. "An invitation, mon cher, from Lord Richard Marchmont of Thornfield Hall. He requests the pleasure of my company, and yours if you would care to accompany me, at his country estate for a most singular occasion." Poirot's eyes scanned the elegant script, the unveiling of what he calls the Azure Peacock, a priceless Indian artifact recently added to his collection. Hastings raised his eyebrows. "Marchmont? The collector? I've heard he has one of the finest private collections of Eastern antiquities in England." "Precisely so, and it appears that this Azure Peacock is the crown jewel, as you English say." Poirot handed the invitation to Hastings. "The event is to take place this weekend. What say you, my friend? Shall we exchange the dreariness of London for the hospitality of an English country house?" "I should say so." Hastings replied with enthusiasm. A weekend in the country is just what the doctor ordered. 2 days later, the rain had given way to a crisp, clear day as their train pulled into the small station that served the village nearest to Thornfield Hall. A polished Rolls-Royce awaited them, its chauffeur standing at attention beside the passenger door. "Monsieur Poirot? Captain Hastings?" the man inquired, touching his cap respectfully. "Lord Marchmont has sent me to convey you to Thornfield Hall." The journey took them through winding country lanes bordered by ancient hedgerows and woodland ablaze with autumn colors. Eventually, the trees parted to reveal their first glimpse of Thornfield Hall, a magnificent Jacobean mansion of red brick and mullioned windows, its facade softened by centuries of ivy. "Remarkable," murmured Hastings as they approached. "One can almost feel the history." "Yes," Poirot agreed, his green eyes narrowing slightly as he observed the house. "And yet, mon ami, it is often in such places of antiquity and respectability that the most modern of sins, greed, jealousy, hatred, find their expression, n'est-ce pas?" The car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, and they were greeted at the entrance by a butler whose dignified bearing suggested decades of service. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned with a slight bow. "I am Winters, the butler. Lord Marchmont awaits you in the library, if you would be good enough to follow me." The interior of Thornfield Hall matched its impressive exterior, oak-paneled corridors lined with ancestral portraits, Persian carpets softening their footsteps, and the subtle perfume of beeswax polish and fresh flowers permeating the air. The library was a large, comfortable room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes. A fire burned in the grate, casting dancing shadows upon the richly decorated ceiling. As they entered, an elderly gentleman rose from a wing-back chair to greet them. "Monsieur Poirot, how delightful that you could accept my invitation." Lord Richard Marchmont extended a hand that, despite its age-spotted appearance, possessed a firm grip. He was tall and spare, with the erect posture of a former military man, silver hair swept back from a high forehead, and keen blue eyes that suggested both intelligence and determination. "The pleasure is mine, Lord Marchmont," Poirot replied with a slight bow. "May I present my friend and associate, Captain Hastings?" Of course, of course. Welcome to Thornfield Hall, Captain." Lord Marchmont gestured to a silver tray bearing a decanter and glasses. "Sherry before dinner? Or perhaps you would prefer whiskey?" As they settled with their drinks, the library door opened to admit a striking woman whose entrance immediately commanded attention. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair arranged in the latest fashion, and a gown of emerald silk that complemented her pale complexion. "Ah, Vivian, my dear," Lord Marchmont said, reaching for her hand, "allow me to present our guests, Monsieur Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. Gentlemen, my wife, Lady Vivian Marchmont." Lady Vivian's smile illuminated her features, though Poirot noted that it did not quite reach her eyes. "The famous detective. How thrilling! Richard has been quite beside himself with anticipation of your visit." "You are too kind, madame," Poirot murmured. The door opened again, admitting a younger man whose resemblance to Lord Marchmont was unmistakable, though his features were harder, his expression less genial. "Jeremy, come in, my boy," Lord Marchmont called. "Meet our distinguished guests." Jeremy Marchmont's handshake was perfunctory, his smile tight. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I trust your journey was comfortable." Before they could respond, a tall, thin woman with iron-grey hair drawn back in a severe bun entered the library. Her black dress, though of excellent quality, had a distinctly outdated cut. "Eleanor, my dear sister," Lord Marchmont said warmly, "come and meet Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings." Miss Eleanor Vance inclined her head stiffly. "Gentlemen, welcome to Thornfield Hall." Her voice was as austere as her appearance, but there was a certain dignity in her bearing that commanded respect. They were soon joined by two more individuals, Dr. Lawrence Pritchard, the family physician, a jovial man with thinning hair and gold-rimmed spectacles, and Rajiv Sharma, introduced as a scholar from Delhi, assisting with the authentication of the Azure Peacock. Sharma was a handsome man of middle age, impeccably dressed in Western clothing, but with a turban wrapped around his head. "It is an honor to meet you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his English perfect but with the musical cadence of his native land. "Your reputation extends even to India." The final introduction came as they moved from the library to the dining room, when they encountered a slender young woman with dark eyes and a distinctly French elegance. "Madeleine," Lady Vivian said, "this is Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings." The French maid dropped a small curtsy. "Messieurs," she murmured, her eyes downcast. Poirot, watching her closely, detected a fleeting expression of surprise, or was it alarm, cross her features before she composed herself and continued on her way. Dinner was served in a dining room that reflected the Marchmont family's prosperity and taste. The silverware gleamed in the light of candelabras, and the porcelain bore the family crest. The conversation flowed smoothly, touching upon art, politics, and Lord Marchmont's extensive travels in the East. It was only when they had retired to the drawing-room for coffee that Lord Marchmont addressed the purpose of their gathering. "Tomorrow evening," he announced, "I shall have the pleasure of unveiling the latest and perhaps most significant addition to my collection, the Azure Peacock." His eyes gleamed with anticipation. It is a masterpiece of ancient Indian craftsmanship, a gold statue of exquisite detail, encrusted with sapphires and emeralds. Its history is as fascinating as its beauty, and as dangerous, added Mr. Sharma quietly. Lord Marchmont waved a dismissive hand. "Rajiv refers to the legend that accompanies the peacock, that death follows it when it leaves its rightful home. Mere superstition, of course." "Is it, Richard?" Miss Vance asked sharply. "3 previous owners have met with untimely ends. Coincidence, Eleanor? Nothing more." The atmosphere in the room had subtly changed, a current of tension running beneath the polite conversation. Poirot, observing each face in turn, noted the varying expressions, concern on Dr. Pritchard's, skepticism on Jeremy's, unease on Lady Vivian's. Later that night, as Poirot and Hastings prepared for bed in their adjoining rooms, Hastings remarked, "Seems a pleasant enough gathering, doesn't it? Though I sensed some undercurrents during that talk of the curse." "Indeed, mon ami," Poirot replied thoughtfully. "The currents beneath the still water, they are often the most treacherous, are they not?" Hastings yawned. "Well, I'm looking forward to seeing this famous peacock tomorrow. Good night, Poirot." "Good night, Hastings." But the unveiling of the Azure Peacock was not destined to proceed as planned. In the dead of night, a piercing scream shattered the silence of Thornfield Hall. Poirot, awakened instantly, found Hastings already at his door. "It came from downstairs, I think," Hastings said urgently. They hurried down the grand staircase to find the household gathering in the main hall, faces pale in the inadequate light of hastily lit lamps. Lord Marchmont, in a dressing gown, was striding toward a room off the main hall. "The display case," he was saying, his voice tight with alarm. "Someone, check the display case." Poirot and Hastings followed him into what appeared to be a small museum, a room dedicated to displaying the finest pieces of his collection. In the center stood an elegant glass case, illuminated by a beam of moonlight from the window above. The case was intact, its lock undisturbed, but the Azure Peacock was gone. Chapter 2. Feathers ruffled morning brought a pale sun and the arrival of Inspector Japp from Scotland Yard, summoned by telegram due to the considerable value of the stolen artifact. The inspector's familiar bulldog countenance was a welcome sight to Poirot amidst the unfamiliar tensions of Thornfield Hall. "Well, Poirot," Japp said after the initial greetings, "can't say I'm surprised to find you already at the scene of the crime. Trouble follows you like a shadow, old man. It is most kind of you to suggest that I am the cause of criminal activity, mon cher Japp," Poirot replied with a slight smile. "But on this occasion I was merely a guest, invited to admire the Azure Peacock, not to investigate its disappearance." "And yet here we are," Japp observed dryly. "Let's have a look at this display case, shall we?" The morning light revealed what the darkness had concealed. The display case that had housed the Azure Peacock was a masterpiece of security, with a complex lock that showed no signs of tampering. The velvet cushion upon which the statue had rested bore only the impression of its absence. "No forced entry," Japp muttered, examining the lock with a magnifying glass. "Whoever took it either had a key or," he trailed off, frowning, "or possessed skills of an exceptional nature." Poirot finished for him, his eyes scanning the room methodically. One by one the inhabitants of Thornfield Hall were interviewed, each providing an account of their movements the previous night. Lord Richard had taken a sleeping draught prescribed by Dr. Pritchard and claimed to have heard nothing until the commotion awakened him. Lady Vivian insisted she had been reading in her room, a statement corroborated by her maid Madeline, who had brought her a tisane before retiring. Jeremy Marchmont admitted to walking the grounds to clear his head after what he described as a rather tense dinner. Miss Vance stated she had heard footsteps in the corridor but assumed it was one of the servants. Dr. Pritchard had been called to attend a patient in the village and had only returned shortly before the alarm was raised. Rajiv Sharma claimed to have been writing letters in the library until late, while Madeleine Dubois maintained she had been asleep in the servants' quarters after attending to Lady Vivian. It was during his examination of Lady Vivian's book, a volume of poetry she claimed to have been reading, that Poirot discovered the first significant clue. A peacock feather dyed a brilliant azure blue pressed between the pages like a bookmark. "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, holding the feather delicately. A message, perhaps, or a warning. The discovery had barely been made when Lord Richard's voice thundered from his study, calling for Dr. Pritchard. They rushed to find the elderly collector clutching a sheet of paper, his face ashen. "A threat," he whispered, handing the note to Japp. "Found it in my desk drawer just now. Written in block capitals were the words, The peacock returns to its home or death follows. Lunch was a strained affair with conversation faltering and suspicious glances exchanged across the table. It was during the serving of the dessert, a trifle that Poirot had been eyeing with appreciation, that Lord Richard suddenly clutched at his throat, his face contorting in pain. "Richard," Lady Vivian cried, rising to her feet. "Poison," Dr. Pritchard said grimly, already moving to his patient's side. "Help me get him to his room." Quickly, as Lord Richard was carried from the dining room, his face now an alarming shade of blue, Poirot exchanged a meaningful look with Japp. The curse of the Azure Peacock, it seemed, was no mere superstition after all. Chapter 3. A trail of blue feathers with Lord Richard Marchmont, languishing in a coma, saved from immediate death only by Dr. Pritchard's swift intervention, a pall descended upon Thornfield Hall. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, its ancient walls bearing silent witness to the drama unfolding within. "Doctor," Pritchard emerged from Lord Richard's bedroom, his face grave as he wiped his spectacles with a handkerchief. "I've identified the poison," he informed Poirot and Japp in hushed tones, "a rare toxin derived from certain plants found only in northern India, extremely difficult to detect unless one knows precisely what to look for." "Most convenient that you were present, Doctor," Poirot remarked, his head tilted slightly to one side. Dr. Pritchard's eyes narrowed behind his spectacles. "If you're implying something, Monsieur Poirot—" "I merely observe, mon ami," Poirot said smoothly. "It is fortunate that your medical knowledge extends to such exotic poisons." The tension in the household escalated with Lord Richard incapacitated. Jeremy Marchmont assumed an air of authority, issuing instructions to the servants, and speaking in hushed tones with the family solicitor, who had been summoned from London. Lady Vivian kept vigil by her husband's bedside, her elegant features now drawn with worry, or was it fear? Poirot, with Hastings faithfully at his side, conducted more detailed interviews with each inhabitant of the house. The revelations came slowly, reluctantly, like drops of water wrung from a stone. Jeremy Marchmont, cornered in the billiards room, admitted with bitter resentment that his father had recently altered his will. "He's left half his estate to Vivian," he confided, striking a ball with unnecessary force. "A woman young enough to be his daughter, who married him for his money and position. The collection, including that cursed peacock, was to go to the British Museum, not to me as he'd always promised." Lady Vivian, when questioned about the azure feather found in her book, turned pale. "I know nothing about it," she insisted, her fingers nervously pleating the silk of her gown. Under Poirot's gentle but persistent questioning, she finally confessed to a detail she had omitted. Before her marriage, she had been an actress. "In one production," she said, reluctantly, "I played the role of a jewel thief." "Is that what you wish to hear, Monsieur Poirot? That I once portrayed the very crime of which I am now suspected?" Miss Eleanor Vance proved to be a repository of family grievances and suspicions. "That Indian man Sharma," she whispered to Poirot as they walked in the rose garden, now sleeping beneath the autumn frost. "I don't believe he is who he claims to be. I've heard him speaking on the telephone in Hindi. I recognized the language from my years in India during the Raj." He was agitated, secretive. The most illuminating interview, however, was with Rajiv Sharma himself. In the library, surrounded by leather-bound volumes of Western literature, he appeared oddly displaced, a vibrant figure against the subdued English backdrop. "The peacock's significance goes beyond its monetary value," he explained, his expression solemn. "It was stolen from a temple in Delhi over a century ago, during the height of colonial plundering. The curse is not mere superstition, Monsieur Poirot, but the accumulated weight of sacrilege and cultural theft." "You were assisting Lord Marchmont with authentication," Poirot prompted. "Did you not inform him of this history?" Sharma's gaze was steady. "I tried. He chose not to hear." That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings made a significant discovery. Behind the display case from which the Azure Peacock had been taken, concealed by a panel that matched the oak wainscoting perfectly, was a small door leading to a narrow passage. "A secret way to access the display case," Hastings exclaimed as they examined the hidden corridor by the light of Poirot's pocket torch. "Indeed, mon ami," Poirot agreed, his fingers brushing along the dusty wall. "But observe the floor, no footprints save our own. This passage has not been used in many years." Later, while examining Dr. Pritchard's medical bag with the doctor's reluctant permission, Poirot found a second azure feather tucked into a small pocket. Pritchard appeared genuinely shocked at its discovery. "I've no idea how that got there," he insisted, beads of perspiration forming on his brow, despite the chill of the room. Evening brought yet another development. As the household gathered for a somber dinner, Lady Vivian received a small package. Upon opening it, she discovered a tiny azure peacock feather nestled within layers of tissue. With a soft cry, she fainted, collapsing into Jeremy's reluctantly supportive arms. The night was far from peaceful. Shortly after midnight, a cry of pain echoed through the house. Hastings, who had taken it upon himself to patrol the corridors, found Rajiv Sharma sprawled at the foot of the grand staircase, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "Someone pushed me," he gasped, as Hastings helped him to his feet. From behind I saw no one. As Dr. Pritchard attended to Sharma's injury, Poirot stood at the top of the stairs, his green eyes scanning the shadowy landing. In the dim light, something caught his attention, a small azure blue feather drifting gently to rest upon the polished wood of the banister. The trail of blue feathers was leading them deeper into a mystery where nothing, Poirot was beginning to suspect, was quite what it seemed. Chapter 4. The Peacock spreads its tail. The following morning dawned grey and cheerless, a fine mist shrouding the grounds of Thornfield Hall. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive as Poirot gathered the household in the library. They assembled like actors on a stage, Lady Vivian, pale but composed, Jeremy Marchmont impatient, Miss Vance rigid with dignity, Dr. Pritchard fussing with his spectacles, Rajiv Sharma with a bandage adorning his forehead, and the French maid Madeleine hovering uncertainly at the back of the room. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his solid presence lending an official gravity to the proceedings. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his waxed moustache catching the light as he spoke, "I have asked you to assemble because I have made a discovery of some significance regarding the theft of the Azure Peacock." He paused, allowing the tension in the room to build before continuing. "The Azure Peacock, it was never stolen at all." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled company. "What nonsense is this?" Jeremy Marchmont demanded. "We all saw the empty display case." "Ah, but did we see it emptied?" Poirot raised a finger. "Observe, if you please." He crossed to the display case which had been brought to the library at his request. With deft fingers he demonstrated a mechanism concealed within its ornate base. "A false bottom," he explained, "activated by this hidden spring." The peacock appeared to vanish, but in reality it was merely hidden within the case itself. "But why?" Lady Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who would do such a thing?" "That, madame, is the question that has occupied my little grey cells," Poirot replied. "And the answer, I believe, lies with this person." He turned swiftly, his arm extended toward the French maid. "Mademoiselle Dubois, or should I say, Mademoiselle Fournier of the Sûreté." Madeleine's composure cracked. With a sudden movement she darted toward the door, only to find her path blocked by the solid form of Inspector Japp. "I think not, mademoiselle," Japp said firmly, taking her by the arm. Under questioning, Madeleine broke down. "I am an agent, yes," she admitted, "but not for the Sûreté. I work for François Belmont, a collector who has sought the Azure Peacock for years. I was to determine its authenticity before arranging its acquisition." "But you did not poison Lord Marchmont," Poirot stated rather than asked. "Poison? Non, monsieur?" I am a thief, perhaps, but not a murderer. I believe you, Poirot said quietly. For the peacock feathers, they were planted deliberately to mislead, a trail too obvious to be genuine. At that moment, the door opened to admit a nurse who had been attending Lord Richard. "He's awake," she announced, asking for everyone. They crowded into Lord Richard's bedroom, where the elderly collector lay propped against pillows, his face ashen, but his eyes alert. "I must confess," he said weakly, "once greetings had been exchanged, I knew the peacock was cursed, not by superstition, but by blood. Every previous owner died violently, assassinated by those who believed the peacock should be returned to its temple." His gaze shifted to Rajiv Sharma. "You tried to warn me, didn't you? But I wouldn't listen. It is not too late to make amends, Lord Marchmont." Sharma replied gravely. Lord Richard nodded feebly. "The peacock must go back where it belongs." That evening, despite heightened security measures, with Japp stationing a constable outside the library, where the Azure Peacock had been secured in a new case, disaster struck again. A crash followed by a cry of alarm brought the household running to the library. The constable lay unconscious, felled by a blow to the head. The display case stood empty once more, and beside it, sprawled on the Persian carpet in a posture of grotesque finality, lay the body of Miss Eleanor Vance. Her eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling, her hand outstretched as if reaching for something now beyond her grasp. At her throat, a tiny puncture wound marked the entry point of the same poison that had failed to kill her brother. The Azure Peacock had truly vanished, and this time it had claimed a life. Chapter 5. The Peacock's True Colours. The death of Miss Eleanor Vance cast Thornfield Hall into chaos. Lady Vivian sequestered herself in her chambers, overcome with shock. Jeremy Marchmont prowled the corridors like a caged animal, while Lord Richard, upon hearing the news, suffered a relapse that confined him once more to his bed. The servants whispered of curses and divine retribution, their fearful glances darting to corners as if expecting the spectral form of Miss Vance to materialize from the shadows. "I want everyone in the drawing-room," Inspector Japp commanded, his patience worn thin by the escalating tragedy. "No one leaves this house until we get to the bottom of this." As the household assembled, Poirot and Japp conducted a thorough examination of Miss Vance's body before it was removed. The puncture wound on her neck was almost imperceptible, a tiny mark that would have gone unnoticed had they not been looking for it. The same poison, Dr. Pritchard confirmed grimly, but administered with surgical precision this time. Poirot's keen eyes spotted something clutched in the dead woman's hand, a small fragment that glittered blue in the lamplight. With tweezers borrowed from Dr. Pritchard's bag, he carefully extracted it. "A piece of sapphire," he murmured, holding it up to the light. "From the Azure Peacock, perhaps. Broken during the theft?" Japp suggested. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his expression thoughtful. "Or perhaps not, mon ami." In the drawing-room the atmosphere was thick with suspicion and fear. Pritchard administered mild sedatives to Lady Vivian, whose composure had finally shattered. Jeremy Marchmont sat apart from the others, a glass of brandy held in a white-knuckled grip. Rajiv Sharma stood by the window, gazing out at the gathering darkness, his face inscrutable. "Before we proceed," Poirot announced, addressing the room at large, "I must request a curious experiment." He turned to Dr. Pritchard. "Doctor, you have equipment for chemical analysis, I believe?" Dr. Pritchard nodded warily. "Basic apparatus, yes, for toxicology." "Excellent. I should like you to analyze this fragment." Poirot handed him the sliver of sapphire. "I am particularly interested in its chemical composition." As the doctor left to conduct the test, Poirot rearranged the furniture in the drawing-room, creating a stage-like setting with chairs positioned as if for an audience. "What are you about, Poirot?" Hastings whispered. "The final act, mon ami," Poirot replied. "The moment when all is revealed." When all were seated, Poirot took his position at the center of the room, his diminutive figure somehow commanding despite his lack of stature. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his accent more pronounced than usual, we have witnessed a most complex affair. A theft that was not a theft, a curse that was not a curse, and now a murder most cold and calculated. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The Azure Peacock, it is indeed remarkable, not merely for its beauty or value, but for a property most unexpected. He paused as Dr. Pritchard returned, his face ashen. "Ah, doctor, you have completed your analysis?" Dr. Pritchard's hands trembled slightly as he nodded. "The sapphires, they contain a rare compound. When dissolved in certain acids it produces the very poison that nearly killed Lord Marchmont and did kill Miss Vance." Poirot finished for him. "A fact you discovered yourself, did you not, doctor?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Dr. Pritchard, whose face had drained of colour. "I don't know what you mean," he stammered. "I think you do," Poirot said gently. "For many years you have loved Miss Vance, a love unrequited and unspoken." Dr. Pritchard sank into a chair, his resistance crumbling. "How did you know? The little details, doctor. The way your eyes followed her when she entered a room, the photograph of her taken many years ago, that you keep in your medical bag, and then there was your knowledge of the poison, so specific, so rare." Poirot addressed the room once more. Dr. Pritchard arranged the false theft using the mechanism in the display case, a mechanism installed years ago by Lord Marchmont's father for security. He created this diversion to distract from his attempt to poison Lord Richard. "But why?" Lady Vivian cried. "Why would he want to harm Richard?" "Because Lord Richard refused his proposal to marry Miss Vance," Poirot explained. "He deemed the doctor unworthy of the Marchmont connection, despite their long friendship." "Lawrence proposed?" Jeremy asked incredulously. "Aunt Eleanor never mentioned it. She did not know," Poirot said. "The proposal was made to Lord Richard, as head of the family, according to the old customs, and it was rejected without Miss Vance ever being consulted." "And the feathers?" Japp prompted. "The ones planted as clues." "Ah, the feathers." Poirot smiled thinly. "Too obvious, too theatrical. They led us precisely where Dr. Pritchard wished us to go, towards suspecting Mr. Sharma and the supposed curse." "But what of Miss Vance's death?" Hastings asked. "If the doctor loved her, she discovered his plan," Poirot said sadly. "Perhaps she recognized the symptoms of the poison, having spent time in India herself. She confronted him, and in desperation, he silenced her. And the real theft?" Japp pressed. "The peacock is still missing." "For that," Poirot said, turning to Jeremy Marchmont, "we must ask the son of the house. The opportunity presented itself amidst the chaos, did it not, Monsieur Jeremy? A chance to take what you believed should have been yours by right." Jeremy Marchmont's face contorted in anger, then collapsed into resignation. "I have gambling debts," he admitted, "substantial ones. The peacock would have settled them, with enough left over to start anew elsewhere." "You shall have the opportunity to make your fresh start," Japp said grimly, "after a lengthy stay as Her Majesty's guest." As Dr. Pritchard and Jeremy Marchmont were taken into custody, Poirot explained to a bewildered Hastings how the pieces had fallen into place. The peacock feathers were indeed the key, mon ami, but not as clues to the culprit, rather as indicators of misdirection. They were too perfect, too convenient. And Dr. Pritchard's medical knowledge made him the only one who could extract and utilize the poison from the sapphires. And Miss Vance's position when we found her. She was reaching not away from her attacker, but toward him, a gesture of pleading perhaps to the man she had known and trusted for decades. Later that evening, Lord Richard, having been informed of the arrests, made a solemn pronouncement from his sickbed. "The Azure Peacock shall be returned to its temple in India," he declared, his voice weak but determined. "Rajiv will see to the arrangements. Perhaps then, this curse of blood and betrayal will finally be broken." As Poirot and Hastings departed Thornfield Hall the following day, The autumn sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the ancient estate. "A sad affair," Hastings remarked. "Love and jealousy, the oldest motives in the world." "Ah, mon cher," Poirot sighed, gazing back at the house. "It is as I have always maintained. The most dangerous passions are those that wear the mask of virtue. Love becomes possession, loyalty becomes obsession, justice becomes revenge. In the human heart, the line between the noble and the terrible is as thin as the edge of a razor." The car rounded a bend in the drive, and Thornfield Hall disappeared from view, its secrets now laid bare by the relentless precision of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. The end.